roll call to order the September 3rd Redevelopment Commission meeting. Allison, can we do a roll call?
Pete Murphy.
Here.
Dale Needleman.
Here.
Larry Longman.
Here.
Alex Jordan.
Here.
Ruth Hess. Here.
Okay.
Greg Brewer. Shannon Walls.
I'm just rip-roaring ready to go. All right. Next we have the approval of the August 6th meeting minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All
Got all the
opposed?
names right?
Yeah,
Yes.
no misters.
No. All right, motion passes 5-0. We got the financial report next. Anything?
The only thing that's not on the financial report that I'll report is we submitted everything on the TIF restatements to the county, and there were still questions. I don't understand at this point. And then we had missed their running of reports, so they still had everything wrong. And so we're still working with them to get it right. And now they want me to sign off on the right lists, which is not really required, but I'll do it once the lists are right. They're just not right yet. So
When do we anticipate, what tax year will it take effect? Will it still be 2025?
yeah, well, we're gonna have to do some behind the scenes shuffling like we did this year for 25, I'm afraid.
Should be 2024.
Or sorry, 24 is going
Hey,
paid in
25.
25.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah.
So we still don't have it right as of this moment. So we haven't seen our projections or anything for next year. So as soon as we get that information, we'll pass it on to you. But we're going to have to see what they give us as projections and see where they laid all the different parcels and what allocation area, and then we're going to have to manually adjust them because they can't get it in their system. So
Is any other municipality having problems like that, or do you know?
I don't even feel like we're that complicated of TIF districts. Cam, correct me if you're wrong, like, we're not doing anything crazy.
No, right. I think this is not uncommon. Just depends on.
I would
When
think,
you have
but-
splits and you got to reconcile them, it often.
I think that's our complication, is so many parcels have split, and then you don't know which one's supposed to go with what. And we have, like, for instance, McCord Square being in the middle of the Broadway, Aurora Way allocation area is confusing, and those parcels didn't exist when we set that up. So we understand that, but then we restated it to make it clear, and it's still not clear, so.
What if you
Especially in
only
a
give them
growing
like half
community.
at a time?
When you have that much sort of real estate activity
What's that?
out there.
Well-
Said, what if you only give them like half at a time? Get those done.
Means you have to go back
Then
and
the next, like, would that make
I
it
think
easier?
we're
Frequently,
close. The problem now is timing. We're so late in the year that we might not be able to adjust I don't know their internal system. There's some program they use at a county level that I don't have access to that only allows them to do so much. So, we're just working through it. We'll get it corrected and fixed, and then we won't make any changes for at least a year, right? So I just wanted you to be aware, we are working on it, we're trying, and we'll get it. Outside of that, everything else seems to be pretty healthy, and we're keeping an eye on the HRH allocation area and the and the Brookside to see how much we can fund out of TIF for that stoplight at Villages of Brookside versus having to supplement that with MVH. So the delay actually helps us get through another funding cycle, so we think we can fund a majority of that through those two TIF districts instead of MVH, which is helpful.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that?
No.
All right. Now we have some old business. It looks like we have a patch development presentation.
Yeah, so Andrew Greenwood is here from Patch Development. We've talked about this project the last couple of meetings. we're working on a term sheet with Patch right now, but we wanted them to come in and go a little more in depth than we have in the past, talk a little bit about what the plan is. And before I let Andrew go, I know the Greenfield Reporter had this was actually presented at the ARC because there's actually some interest on this project, I think. So we're trying to keep parallel processes moving if we can. That being said, it got picked up by the Greenfield Reporter, and a lot of the comments in it, this is not a shot at the Greenfield. I've been on you all night. A lot of the comments on the website, though, where I just addressed real quick of this is not another warehousing project. It's actually the opposite of that. This area was zoned and scheduled for 1 million square foot building and 2 600,000 square foot buildings. We did not want that. We heard the public say we do not want more of that in McCordsville. So this was kind of the compromise to bring that to a scale. We still think there's an opportunity to create more jobs, and we think that there is a market for job creating businesses that want more of that 20 to 100,000 square foot space that's their own versus being part of a bigger warehouse. So this flex space idea with the potential of some commercial up front made a lot more sense in a better scale than what was presented there before, and still allows the town to capture some of that 3% AV, which is vital to diversifying your tax base to make you a stable community. So I just wanted to be clear, it's not just more warehousing being considered. This is a different product and a different scale. You get to follow that.
Yeah, he did all the talking. I don't think I need to say anything else. So we're Patch Development. We're headquartered over on 96th Street in Fishers. We've been around for 5 years as a company, but we have about 25 years of experience. Each one of our principals do in all kinds of different real estate development. And what we found is working very well for us, and we think for other communities, is this very concept, which is a mixed use development. And so what we have here and what we hope to do here on about 36 acres is a combination of both retail and flex light industrial buildings. These are buildings that look like office in the front, but then have maybe one dock and drive-in doors in the back, maybe not, depending on the user. But it allows that flexibility for someone who needs a smaller business, who needs office space, but also needs warehouse space. And so it's very vital for all of these communities. And usually a lot of these purveyors or companies like to follow and be relatively close to growing communities like what you have here, because they live here in these communities, and then also not too far from the bigger box, right? Because a lot of times they're the ones that are working at the Walmart facility, right? And they're doing the engineering for them, and maybe they manufacture a small piece and they need a warehouse, but then they have office engineers also. So in these smaller buildings, they can range anywhere from about 25,000 to 80,000 is what we are projecting here. It could go probably smaller than the 80, most likely. Maybe you have one or two that are 60 to 80,000, but the majority would be the smaller square footage sizes, and they attract quality smaller businesses that are usually locally owned, higher paying jobs, and not logistics based. So the goal here on this development is to maintain on the corner where the roundabout is, to have some retail lots, especially on what you see there's lot 2 and lot 3. Those would be primarily dedicated for retail. So and there's some pictures later on in this presentation of potentially what they could look like, and we can go through those. And then the lot 4, and then what would be the north of that, we would say that could be retail or flex. But as we talked about in the ARC, we would have to upgrade the architecture as it faces Mount Comfort Road. So the exterior of that would have to be a higher, better looking building with probably more masonry and some more glass and a little bit better looking, because it's going to face that main road. And then the goal of these other buildings is to match them to the right customers and make sure that we have quality, attractive looking buildings. So it's not like the stuff in the back is going to be a big 1 million square foot warehouse. It's not at all. It's just that we definitely identify that the stuff along Mount Comfort Road needs to have a higher level architecture. The other thing is, historically, the majority of these buildings, not always the case, depends on who needs to be in there, but the height is not nearly as high as what you see as you go farther south on Mount Comfort Road. So the height is usually about 20 to 24 foot clear. So the total height is maybe 2.5 stories. So this is not going to overpower anything. It's going to match up with what the height's going to be on a convenience store or a strip center that might be, or a standalone quick service retail. So in terms of like overpowering buildings, these aren't 3 or 4 story buildings looking down on other things. And so we're pretty intentional with how we like to set this up. And the goal here is to get this main corridor through with this boulevard and get the utilities in so that the growth can happen. Because without that, it's pretty hard. So we've been working with Tim, and I think there's some tweaks and some conversations that need to continue to happen in terms of building orientation and setbacks, and I assume that'll all be a part of our PUD and kind of approval process as we work with Tim and Ryan to vet all that out, along with architecture as well. So if you want to go to the, I mean, we can just, so these are examples, like that's our headquarters building right there on 96th Street, right across on the northwest corner of 96 and Masters. It looks like a Class A office building, but it's not. It's office in the front and then warehouse in the back. And then the other one's maybe that's a Noblesville product. It's, maybe a little bit more of the more simpler flex type building. And then these are some retail examples.
Hey, Andrew, that one you just pointed out, are those the ones on the north side of 96 that were just built?
Yeah.
Where you're in?
Yeah.
You guys have a putting green out there? Do you have a golf hole?
Oh no,
No.
there's the one guy who in the front office has one of those putting mats.
Okay. It looked to me like there was a tee and a green exterior. No.
No,
I must be thinking another one.
Maybe
Cars
next one.
that were hit.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Was that, sorry, just curious, was that like a cast-in brick?
So that's actually a precast that's been painted to look like brick.
And, okay.
And it's got a precast front, but then CMU block masonry and then metal panel.
Looks pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's very attractive, and, so we
You have to
understood.
How often do you have to repaint something like that? Ever?
On that, probably never. On the precast that's painted, probably never. It'll wear and look like brick wearing. But the reason why we like these buildings, there's a lot of flexibility. So depending on, the user, we share that building with a specialty pharmacy that's going in there. And so they had some pretty unique things that they were wanting to do. And so because of that, having the flexibility of a pre-engineered metal building instead of a precast building was really important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we like those buildings, because it gives us more flexibility. We feel like you can still make things look pretty good with, some good quality products, and it doesn't all have to be, just brick or just glass, or you can use metal panel and make it look good, and you can use some of those other products as well. And so like in this building, this is actually a different building that you're seeing on the bottom. That's the back side of the building that's to the
See if I can pull it up a little
to the west of our office, which is a bigger building. It's 95,000 square feet.
Okay.
And that has multiple docks and, multiple drive-ins. These buildings probably would not have that. It just depends on the user, but we wouldn't expect them to have probably more than one dock, or maybe two, depending on their use, but probably a drive-in.
Just curious, without
Yeah.
naming anybody, but the tenants that are interested, would it be similar to what you said? Just one dock type operation?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have two different folks that we're talking to. I can't say who, but they're quality companies, good paying jobs, and they're both looking in that kind of 60,000 square foot range.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same story. I think the owners live in the area,
Sure.
like the proximity to the airport, the proximity to the interstate. Their companies are in the general, east side of town, so it works for them. And I think we'll continue to have folks that will come forward with that. It's just we've got to get some roads in and do some other things first. But
We'd feel great if we had a couple tenants lined up from day one. That makes the security of the bond feel much better.
yeah. And
So-
I think we've had really good conversations with Cam and Tim about what that will look like. And this isn't our first rodeo, so we've done this all over kind of the donut area. We've done a lot of these, especially this specific product, doing a smaller TIF deal where we're able to put this together. It works really well because, 3%, usually high 2%, tax rate, and we're not asking for anything to fill the gap or, to make sure that we're getting the rents. We're basically saying, hey, if you can help us put the roads and infrastructure in, then the rest takes care of itself, and then you get the benefit of that long term, because we're not looking for money in our pocket. We just need to get that stuff in so that we can present something that looks really good. So
So when you do the second row in the back, not the ones facing the main, but the next ones, will those have to go through all the architectural and we can
Yeah,
make sure they line up?
everything, so we'll have to set,
Right.
there's a PUD on this area right now, planned unit development, which sets the height limits, setbacks, berms, all that stuff, but it's all set for I-1, which is the bigger industrial. So we'll go through that whole process again, and that's why you went to the architectural review committee first, to kind of get an idea of what the expectations are gonna be for all the buildings. So that PUD will reflect what all the buildings have to look like, setbacks, berming, landscaping, all that fun stuff will be laid out very much in the PUD.
height limitations,
Height
building size limitations, all of those things. To make sure that
lighting.
we're not going to go and try and do a 1,000,000 square footer, right? Which
Yeah,
protects both.
yeah.
both
It'll
of
limit
us.
the max size of a building and all that fun stuff, so. We just think this fits, I think there's a market for this. I think this is what McCordsville should be targeting versus the bigger warehouse. We have plenty of bigger warehouse. We have a lot of warehouses that have already been approved by the county that aren't built yet because they're not full yet. So we were just talking about GDI just to the south of this. There's a 10-building complex, and I think only one or maybe two are built. So there's 7 or 8 more warehouses that have already been approved. We don't need that, but we do like diversifying our tax base, and this is as straightforward of a TIF deal as you're going to see. Put the infrastructure in, which is a perfectly legitimate from day one TIF use is infrastructure, and so running water, sewer, storm, and putting the road in. In exchange, we open up new area for development. Patch comes in, handles the development aspect, and the development pays for that infrastructure. So that's as basic and straightforward of a, now there's some nuances to the bond and the backings and all that fun stuff, but in general, as straightforward of a TIF bond partnership with the developers you're ever gonna get right here. And it cash flows really, assuming that build out continues on and there is a demand, this project cash flows really well. It's, we'll have to structure it a little different because these are not spec buildings. We did talk about doing a spec building at least to start the ball rolling as some security. Hopefully that doesn't even come into play if we have a couple tenants lined up. So that just makes everything better. But since the idea was we'll basically build about 2 per year, those first few years are a little tighter when you're ramping up your AV. And then it cash flows really well after that. So
And
that's
where's
kind of the term
closest
sheet.
neighborhood to it.
So right up
With
here
people in it.
is
Stansbury.
Stansbury off to the corner. So original. Hey, let me zoom out here. I got too big now. Actually, let me go to Google Maps. So if you go down here, so this project is this corner right here. So this is Stansbury. And that's interesting, you break that up. So the original industrial project was all the way to here and over and down. So this is, does it go into this one?
Yeah, it was the whole quarter
It
section.
basically cuts it off here for phase
Okay.
1. I did notice
Oh.
you went a little bit up.
No, we only go to right here.
Oh, I'm sorry, right here. And then phase 2 would be right here. So
Yep.
we are significantly, that's another important part. You write this down. No, I'm just kidding. we're also shrinking the amount of acreage that would be industrial as well. And then there are some future, they're not connected to this project, but the idea is that infrastructure would run. And then there is some housing, there's a housing subdivision kind of looking here, and then one that would infill here. So it would actually transition into housing over there, which I think Stansbury in particular would be much happier about having housing instead of a giant warehouse in their backyard. So it shrinks the acreage. All this goes from industrial to residential. This stays industrial, but a less intense industrial. And again, diversifies our AV and gives us a nice entrance coming in.
And I think we've designed and talked to Tim and Ryan about making sure that that road that goes north-south would be able to then perpetuate into phase 2 and hopefully mirror and do additional development the same way, retail and flex along Mount Comfort and a little bit more flex, but making sure we have the right buffer to the west.
My personal opinion is this will be successful and it will gain momentum, and they'll do phase 2 sooner than we think they're going to do phase 2. You never know, but my fear is always that we're not doing a little bit more, saving a little bit more for additional, because I think this will build out pretty nice, but we'll just have to find another spot.
Is the road going to be right away or private?
Right away.
It will be? Okay.
So on this one, and I warned Andrew that we were going to talk about changing this a little bit, but this moved up a little bit, by the way, in this drawing.
I think just
It's actually on the northern part a little bit, but basically this, on this design, would become public, the main corridor, and then the internal roads would stay
That's what I
private. And we've had some conversation about the pond. We don't really want the ponds, so they'd be part of the build out because you need them to absorb the road.
I don't think
drainage.
they want them either.
Nobody really wants the ponds.
Mark wants them.
Unfortunately,
So we're going to
yeah.
negotiate that they take the ponds.
Yeah.
So, so the main part will be the infrastructure and the road of the main corridor. We might shift that a little bit, but we'll talk about that after.
Tim, what would the access be to lots 2, 3, and 4 there? Is it going to be off of Mount Comfort? And we're going to have multiple drive-ins there? Or will it
No,
be
so
from the
all this
backside?
would be internal. The only cut on Mount Comfort, so you have the roundabout here, obviously it's getting
Right.
built. Main entrance off of 500, and this actually is in line with our Mount Comfort corridor plan. This would be far enough away from here that you could have an access point right here, but that'd be your only access point till you get to Aurora Way then. So, and then over here, if they ever built out over here, that would be, you'd want to line that up, so that's an intersection. And then if you go, so you have Aurora Way here, and there's plans with this project that was approved. I always forget the name of it. I always call it the red
Yeah.
door or something, but Aurora Way will come across here. It won't connect. It'll stop about right here. And then this one would come down and then come down, although we're going to talk about realigning that a little bit. But so your curb cut would basically be right here and then Aurora Way right here. So you'd have 500 right here, Aurora. So you minimize the amount of intersections into 600, which everyone's worried about, traffic on 600, right? With the idea that Aurora Way will have a roundabout, and this project actually will be, if successful and cash flowing, will be the way that you actually pay for that Aurora Way roundabout in the future. So, partially.
Timing-wise, if everything gets approved, what are we looking at?
So our hope is that we get a term sheet put together. They're kind of going through they went through the ARC. I think so far we haven't seen a big roadblock where someone's thrown up their arms saying this is the worst project on earth. So our intent is to continue to work on a project agreement, which will outline the bond terms, the security, our commitments, their commitments, all those fun exhibits. We'd like to get that back. I think the key here is we have some people looking at the site, so we want to move quicker than not. So that project agreement would be a 1 meeting approval, right, Cam? If we can get it to you in October, that'd be great. We'll just see how the negotiation and outlines go. And then from there, it'll go through the PUD process as its own, but that'll take 90 days 180 days, depending on how well it goes. And then, once that is completed, we'd probably start the bond, they'll start engineering, and then we'll start the bond process that will go through here, probably the EDC. It'll have to make a stop at the town council, so, you know, we'll try to line those up as best we can to keep it moving so that the funding then gets, let's say best case scenario, late spring of 2025, and they're engineering over the winter, and they're breaking ground
As soon as we can.
late spring of 25 if all went well. That's as generic as I can get of a timeline for you. We'd obviously have a much firmer timeline once we get all the details lined up. But I think our goal is to get this in front of you in October if possible, so that we can keep moving it.
I'd like to see you spend the 2 buildings, 180.
These
Put
two?
those docks on the west side versus the east.
And I'll just pull the Band-Aid a little bit. We can talk about this offline, but the more we looked at this, and with that comment, that was exactly what I told you Ryan was going to say too, is actually moving this road here, and then making this the main road, the public road, and that way it better serves your commercial outlots, and they're on a main road, and then you flip those buildings, because one of your concerns you said was that the building owner wants their front to be the parking lot. So let's make that the main public road with the infrastructure. Our engineer said that's far enough away. It actually lines up with a barn across the street, which is better too. So you actually move the pond over and eliminate this part. This can either become a T where truck traffic goes this way and car traffic goes this way, or it could just simply be a curved road with a T that goes over here. We can figure that out, but we actually, there's a little bit of cost to making that a curve there, but we actually like that a little better. And then that takes away this from being a drag strip for you.
Yeah.
It actually breaks that up so that there's a little bit of motion in there. And we think that by that being the public road, that actually lines up with the northern Aurora Way connection a little better. Possibly. We couldn't quite figure that one out.
Yeah, I think we're open to re-envisioning it. I think this is like the 6th version that we've done,
Yeah.
and we've moved the road
So you
20 times.
Yeah,
I mean, just going back and forth and with Tim and Ryan and saying, hey, what about the road here? So I think we're open to that conversation, and I know the orientation is important to everyone. And
Especially
while
the
as much
600.
as it's important to you guys, it's also very important to us because we want to make sure that it looks really good so that when a business owner comes into the park and they see it, they feel comfortable, because not everyone has the vision of seeing it on paper. So being able to drive in there and understand things, and it's really important to us that it looks professional and nice and that it's consistent. So I think we're, as I would tell Tim, we're open to re-envisioning that drive and making sure that it works and it lines up with the future growth, as long as we can still fit the puzzle pieces in and get folks to build there and either be tenants or buy buildings. That's really the goal.
Sure.
So will every building be the same color, or will that be up to prospective tenants / owners?
I wouldn't say they'd all be the same color. I think we'd like to see there be some kind of continuity with the architecture. I think the ARC probably will dictate some of that as well. Usually,
the PED will.
something similar. I mean, we don't want to have every building look identical, but
Blending.
I know that at least one of the groups that's talking to us has it would be a very, very attractive building. So it would have a lot more like the one on the left than the one on the right in that picture.
Okay.
So, but some of that depends on, I think they want to own their building, right? So
Right.
they're willing to maybe spend a few more dollars because they plan on being in the community for a really long time, which is a huge positive for all of us.
Right.
So. So
We
it
got-
sounds like we
got
have some
work to
engineering
do on
work to
site
do.
plan and details, and Ryan's got a lot of work to do, so we just have to get an agreement drafted, so.
And I guess maybe for us as a committee, think of it more like the Morpheed type building, that you see a little further south. I think that's kind of what they're presenting here, specifically on the west side. That style of building, it's just shorter roof lines, fewer docks, more
Yeah.
cars.
this project ultimately is at the RDC because it doesn't happen without the TIF bond due to the infrastructure. So you're the ultimate decision. You're not the only decision maker. It goes through a lot of the other processes, but we're not going to waste a lot of time and effort in those other processes if the RDC doesn't pass it. So this is your opportunity to hear it. We thought it was important to hear it, and you have time to think about things you'd like to see in there and have us consider through those other processes. So, we don't expect you to necessarily think of everything today, but let us know as you come up with questions so that we can answer those, because we do want to keep this process moving.
There's only one other thing that comes to my mind just as far as master planning is concerned. So you mentioned one of them, Tim, and that's alignment on the south. We don't know what GDI is doing, but quite frankly,
I could try to find it.
first guy in wins. So your curb cut, if it's where it's going to go, then GDI needs to line up with you. But the other thing I'm thinking about is on the east side of 600, we got kind of a mismatch of houses over there. But there is a substantial tract of land that has 2 tracks that do connect to 600. I don't know if it's possible for any alignment there with
They have some down here. We met with them not long ago. They own, I think, right in here. The reality is that is only a right in, right out. We told them that because you couldn't do a full access. You're too close to the roundabout coming out there.
Yeah.
And on the corridor plan, it doesn't allow for full access there. So we have told them exactly what we're telling you tonight, which is you really need to acquire the property up here and line up.
Piece right there.
And you can still do your right in, right out there, but that's all you're going to get there.
And that's kind of been our conversation and understanding is we're not going to get full access other than all the way up there and there. And if maybe there's an opportunity for a right in, right out for retail purposes, that'd be great. But we need to work through that with specific plans. So
Sure.
it makes sense from our perspective. We would echo everything that Tim said.
Yeah.
And like you said, first one in gets to make the.
That's right. First investor.
All right. So
I mean,
thank you.
I like the idea that Tim presented with maybe the spine roads. What we fund is in the front.
We just came up with that about 30 minutes before the meeting, so.
Perfect timing.
At least it was before the meeting. And not after.
We have a drawing. All right.
All right.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. We got some new business.
Just a-
Budget line.
Just the budget, and I'm only bringing this up because we have a few things tucked into the overall capital projects plan that are potential TIF purchases. We obviously haven't had that discussion yet. Our budget conversations, hindsight, the future, we'll probably want to swap these around a little bit and have this discussion earlier than not. It's kind of hard to do. It's like everything else in municipal government budgeting is you get the information after you do the budget. So I know John's tried to figure that out as well, because you don't actually know like your revenue or anything until you've already done a budget, and then you have to adjust. Same thing here. We haven't seen our projections for TIF, yet we're putting a budget. And last year, the state of Indiana added actually it was 2 years ago now, they gave us a year of grace. We actually have to put somewhat of a budget together. You used to just kind of allocate your TIF, and then the idea of TIF is it's flexible, so as projects come up, you can move quickly. Well, now they want you to put a little bit of parameters of, we think we could potentially buy these properties, or we might build this road, or we might put money into this park. And so we have a few of those tucked. Hold on a second. We have a few of those tucked into next year's plan, so I just wanted to run by so there were no surprises. And this doesn't mean we're going to do these, but we wanted to show where we are potentially allocating some things. So, wrongs. Darn it. Technical glitch here. Hold on.
Yeah. See, where's Ryan?
So, now I can't see over there. Oh, here we go. McCord Square amenity additions. So we were originally we had to shift the fund a little bit. Again, the typical TIF things, infrastructure, park improvements, things like the property acquisition's a huge one. So there's a few things. the entrance signs, the plaza fountain and everything that we were going to take out of the park bond. And then we had some money, we added some money in ARPA, which then shifted some other money. So we've tucked that into TIF right now, that we might come back and say, hey, we'd like to do these. It's not the full amount. We have some others coming out of another fund. But because we had to shift, we had to pick up some money on ARPA for something else. So I tucked that under Broadway TIF, which is perfectly allowable use for that. We'd come back and ask you, but I wanted to let you know we had that in there. We have about 300 total, 125 we kind of allocated here. Central Green Engineering, 180,000. I originally had this out of the Geo bond, but we're trying to pay for the renovations of this building and the community center out of cash, so I'm trying not to overcommit the general fund. This would be the actual engineering. We've done some design work already on the Central Green, which is the big 4-acre park with the amphitheater and everything. We have potentially earned about $2.6 million already, $2 grant money for that park. So this is a minor investment by us to do the engineering so that we can move fast, because if we officially get awarded that, the state of Indiana wants us to move very quickly. So this would be the fastest way for us to, we've already kind of engaged on some preliminary work. We're just paying out a consultant money right now, but if we have to dive in and say, okay, they're going to award us this $2.6 million, we need to move fairly quickly. So we tucked that into Broadway as well. This was old. This is the Pocket Park. This is the one on Broadway. This is one of the parcels that we had identified. I just tucked it in there for, if case there's land acquisition that comes up, that's the one I picked. That's probably the one that we probably need to pick up next if we're doing it. And then on Brookside, we obviously have the signal in there. So I just put that on the line. These don't technically need to be in the capital plan. TIF doesn't need to be in your capital plan. But when I'm talking to the town council about all the projects that we want to accomplish, they're like, that sounds great. You're going to put a signal up there. How are you going to pay for it? I wanted to show them we have a plan. It's just, it's in a different account that is funded through the RDC. So that's all we tucked in for next year. That doesn't mean that's what we're going to necessarily use it for. As I've talked to you in the overall budget, we know we have full bond payments coming out next year. So we think we're fine on that, and we'll actually have some money to do a couple of these projects, which is nice. There's some other parcels we've identified as ones we might want to pick up, so we'll have a discussion as an RDC of what we think those properties, those priorities are, if they become available in the next month or two, because we have to do two things by the end of the year yet. We have to do this new budget, if you will, that we have to submit to the DLGF, right?
Yeah.
And we have to do our overlapping taxing unit presentation, which last year went a little long, I'll admit that, but it's where I kind of like to do a general TIF overview and then what we accomplish, what we plan to accomplish, and let everybody know how we're utilizing our TIF districts. So that's required as well. And so we'll do that. If not in October, we'll do it in November. So we're done by the end of the year. Any issues with any of this? It does not commit you to doing these projects. I just needed to show that we were accounting for the money, and this would be where I was accounting it from. We'd have to come back and ask for any of these.
So we
Okay.
think we got 855,000 total in projects. We can pay for that from our TIF proceeds.
Yeah, the big one's the Brookside TIF, which is the HRH TIF in the
Right.
Brookside, and we're assuming it's probably a little more than 400. That, again, we're trying to pay as much of that as out of TIF, but we also don't want to zero out all those balances. So
Sure.
we actually flipped that. We originally had 400 in MVH and we had 300 in TIF, but since we're delayed to the spring, we're going to get that December draw. We should put it closer to 400 on our side, 300 on the other side. So, yeah, the other part's in here somewhere. I'd have to find it. It's one of these down here.
Trail
Brookside, there it
maintenance.
is, right there, MVH. So we have another 300 for that one. And again, we haven't zeroed in on the actual cost of that either yet. We said it could be 700. It could also be 500. So, we'll see.
But it doesn't require any right of way, right?
No, it doesn't. Mostly the variant in cost is types of pole, how decorative
Okay,
a pole. Do we want to do mast arms versus strain poles? all those decisions have to be made yet. They're out there surveying. We had signed, you guys approved that contract, so they're doing that work right now. And then we'll come back and have some decisions to make on what exactly we want. We've given them the direction of pedestrian safety and enhanced crossings are the top priority, because that's the number one concern we hear is no safe way to cross 600. So a little extra signage, a little more obvious pedestrian crosswalks. I think that's money well spent versus the nicest pole on earth. So, okay.
Okay.
So some of this will go to council at their next meeting, but I wanted you to be aware that we were putting that in the project. So.
All right. Well, we do not have a town council liaison.
There's one here, though.
No, we do have one.
He looks
I'd hate to put him on the spot. Tim, is there anything that came up that you think we should? But I hate to put you on the spot too.
No, everything's great.
I gotta look at the minutes.
I'd be happy to look at the agenda and let you know if I could even.
A couple of developments. that
Dr.
came in.
Dr. Burney had led a affordable teacher housing subcommittee, and gave the report on that. We've done some follow-up. Actually, Cam came in and met with Dr. Burney, and we discussed some options. This was a very focused discussion on a specific subdivision. I think there will ultimately be broader conversations about how do we have livable options for police officers, fire, teachers. It's really an affordable housing conversation. So this was a good start, some good data, and that was reported. This is all related, all these internet contracts and everything are related to the new police station. Just so you know, we're going to centralize our IT now that we don't have just one building. We're going to do kind of a hub and spoke system that will be based out of the police station. We felt that was the most secure location. It's also built for it, which is not here. So all that's going to be happening really soon in the next 30 days. Our servers and everything will be hosted out of there, and we'll be basically virtual modules over here. So, outside of that, we approved the parking amendments, which basically restricts parking on our main corridors. We're having some issues with people parking along like 900, 700. So that restricts that parking, and then it also gives an option for subdivisions and residence subdivisions to petition parking on one side of the road or not, but it takes a majority of homeowners in that area. It doesn't necessarily have to be led by HOAs, because sometimes HOAs disagree with some of their constituents. It has to do with 51% of the people petitioning the town to consider restricting parking on one side or the other, and also telling us which side they prefer. So we don't have to make that decision for them.
Are all subdivisions public right-of-ways?
Not all of them are.
So it'd only be ones on public
It has to be
right-of-ways,
a
right?
public road, and then it has to be petitioned by 51%, and that's defined very specifically because a renter, a lot of rental homes, you're never going to hear from the owner.
Right.
So the resident could actually, has the ability to sign if there's a problem there.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
As long as it's one person per lot.
Okay.
So you hope it was the owner, but we all know how that works. So we tried to give some flexibility in it. Nuisance ordinance, we continued, we had an official first reading. That's we'll have the second reading and public hearing at the next time. And I think we're close to having that one in line to move on. We had some minor updates to the salary ordinance. We have added an amendment, which the meeting right before you was the other half of this amendment to the BOT. That is approving the build-out for the gun range of the police station. Jacoby Legacy Farms PUD, which is to the east of McCord Square, was approved. So that project will slowly be moving on. Part of that was a sewer development agreement with the town of McCordsville, where they will build a new lift station kind of behind, a little further behind Stanley, which opens up our next basin. We'll have some work to do, but that'll be the lift station for the next basin to open up new developable land, kind of where the soccer park and beyond is. fee schedule amendments. Garbage and recycling RFP was approved, so we have approved the bid with Priority Services. So we are working on a rate study, and if they'd ever get back to us, a contract. We'll get there.
Right.
I like to add a little extra commentary there. Our hope is to have the contract in October and the rate study here in September, October, because we have to have a public hearing as well. That would then give us a couple months to communicate with the public and talk about transition and all the wonderful new services hopefully we'll have in January and how much they cost. And then the roundabout island, so 500 north and 600 west will be technically our first roundabout. The county's building it, but it'll be our entryway. That's kind of our agreed upon entryway. So we have done some general guidelines of what roundabouts in McCordsville will look like, as well as this particular one will have a centerpiece art concept. I'll just show it to you. This kind of M, which is really our logo, that's all glass and metal, with the idea being it's kind of a welcome to McCordsville. We won't have those in every single roundabout. A lot of the others will mostly just be landscaping, and we have a whole guidebook to different materials and different ways you can structure those materials. So we have some consistency and you have a feel to your town. So that was approved, and we're in design for the 500 roundabout because that'll be probably installed early next year. And those are the main highlights.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any public comment? If not, then I will just say our next meeting is October 1st, and I just need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I moved to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5.